say I'm a CTO interested in diving into this. I'm sure there's similar resources to just understand Kubernetes, but is it as expensive to shift? Say, I've decided this is the future. I want our company to have the flexibility that Kubernetes provides, all the functionality that it provides, et cetera. But we have this 15-year-old legacy application. Is it gonna be as expensive as people think to migrate to it? And like, when, if you're sitting down with that person, when do you advise that they make this change, and when do you say, yeah, your old architecture's terrible, but it's going to be a lot worse to have to rebuild everything to work in this new world? Or like, what are the sliders on that and the changes in that paradigm?
Whew, that's a deep question.
I'm trying to answer big of a question.
Yeah.
Just put you on the spot.
I think it's important to mention that Kubernetes is not a magic tonic for everybody's enterprise technology problem.
Can we cut that out?
What's that?
We're just gonna. No, I'm kidding.
So Kubernetes made me grow hair again.
Yeah,
no, I mean, and so I think that the term cloud native architecture exists for a reason, right? I mean, there are ways that you are designing and building applications, and using microservices that lend itself a lot better to things like Kubernetes or just cloud in general. So I think it's important to consider that if you are the CTO that wants to wholesale shift over. I think that as far as overall cost, where I see people running into problems is this sort of idea of like, well, we just want to dip our toe in a little bit. And so, what you end up with from like an engineering organizational standpoint is you end up where you're managing these two things, and now instead of paying to manage one thing, you're paying to manage two. And so you see a lot of cost incurred there versus saying like, we are actually going to commit to moving all of our stuff, re-architecting a little bit maybe, or at least moving all of our workloads into cloud, into Kubernetes. Yeah. And you see a lot of a much better return there. And then on top of that, with that added abstraction layer, you get a lot better density with your infrastructure, which will ultimately save you money in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a talk very recently about transformation in organizations, and part of the argument was that there is a cost, and it's going to hurt, and you have to accept that there's a cost, because if you go in hoping to avoid the cost, you end up with something much more expensive, like you're talking about, where you didn't commit to either thing, and now you have both. But that's interesting. Any other thoughts on that question? I know it was a very big question.
I mean, the only other thing I would say is like, taking a step back and trying to scope down the problems you're trying to solve with Kubernetes, or with like, what problems the business has and how, like, what tool set can fix those problems. Just to, again, kind of scope things to make sure you're solving the right problems versus just implementing new technologies. And there's also an interesting anecdote from a book I've read, I forget what it's called, but it's this theory of like 36 hours of pain. So like a lot of people sometimes avoid making a difficult decision and drag that decision out a very long time. And a lot of times, sometimes just making the decision will just lead to about 3 days, that's not 36 hours, but 3 days of pain or so, and then like you kind of figure it out, and now you're in this new world and things like start happening. So yeah, if you're going to jump in with both feet, in my opinion.